They came to my door with fake badges and smug grins, claiming my home wasn't mine anymore. The so-called HOA compliance officers told me my land had been annexed, my property now under their control. They handed me a bogus eviction notice, telling me I had 30 days to leave. Or else. At the head of this scam? Karen Dunlap, a ruthless real estate shark who built her empire by stealing homes from unsuspecting owners. She thought I was just another victim, another name on her list of easy targets. She thought her threats, her fake violations, and her hired muscle would break me like they had so many others. What she didn't know? I'm a detective, and she just tried to con the wrong man. By the time this was over, Karen's empire would crumble, her fake enforcers would be running scared, and Oak Ridge HOA would no longer exist. But let's start from the beginning. I had always loved my home, a quiet, well-kept ranch sitting on a few acres of land just outside a small Texas town. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, bought fair and square with years of hard work. No HOA breathing down my neck, no ridiculous rules about what color I could paint my house or how short my grass had to be. Just peace, freedom, and the satisfaction of knowing that no one could tell me how to live on my own land. So when I heard a sharp knock on my front door one warm afternoon, followed by two men standing on my porch in cheap uniforms, I already had a bad feeling. Something about them screamed wannabe authority. And then I saw the badges clipped to their belts, cheap, plastic-looking things that wouldn't fool anyone who knew what a real badge looked like. "Good afternoon, sir," the taller one said, his voice deep and authoritative. He was a big guy, probably 6'2", with a graying mustache and the kind of gut that said he spent more time barking orders than doing actual work. "We're with the Oak Ridge HOA Compliance Department. We've received multiple complaints about your property violating HOA standards. You need to vacate the premises within 30 days. I blinked, stunned for a second. "Oak Ridge HOA?" I repeated slowly. "This isn't even an HOA neighborhood." The second man, shorter and stockier, crossed his arms over his chest and smirked. He had that cocky, we-own-this-place attitude that made my skin crawl. "That changed recently," he said. "The board voted to annex your property into the association. It's all legal. If you don't pay the outstanding fees, your home will be seized." I felt the slow burn of anger rising in my chest. Seized? These clowns thought they could just walk up to my house and claim it like some kind of Wild West land grab? "You're trespassing," I said, stepping forward. "I don't answer to an HOA, and unless you have a court order, you have no authority here." The mustached man pulled out a thick folder and held it out. "Here's your notice of violation," he said smoothly. "We strongly advise you to comply before this becomes a legal matter." I snatched the folder and flipped through it. The so-called violations were laughable. Unauthorized structure, tool shed. My shed had been there for years. Unapproved fencing. It was the same wooden fence that had been on the property since before I even bought the place. Non-compliant landscaping. What the hell did that even mean? I let out a dry chuckle. "I'm not signing anything," I said, tossing the folder onto my porch. "Now get off my property." I reached for my door, but the short guy wasn't done yet. He stepped forward, trying to look intimidating. "If you don't cooperate, we'll have no choice but to escalate," he said, his voice dripping with fake authority. "We can have your property condemned." I froze, then turned to face him fully. My expression was calm, but inside I was seething. "Is that a threat?" I asked, my voice low. He smirked. "Just a fact. Big mistake." I wasn't about to roll over and let some fake HOA goons steal my property. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, coffee going cold as I dug into everything I could find on the Oak Ridge HOA. And what I found? It stank of corruption. The so-called compliance officers weren't just bluffing. This HOA had been recently taken over by a woman named Karen Dunlap, a real estate investor with a nasty habit of strong-arming homeowners into selling their properties cheap. And now, she had set her sights on my land. This wasn't about compliance. It was a land grab. The next morning, I decided to pay a visit to my neighbor, Tom Weller, a retired lawyer who had lived here longer than anyone. If someone knew what was really going on, it was him. As I stepped onto his porch, Tom was already there, rocking in his chair, sipping his morning coffee like he'd been expecting me. "Let me guess," he said with a knowing smile. "HOA came knocking?" I nodded, handing him the bogus violation notice. He barely glanced at it before letting out a dry chuckle. "They've been pulling this scam all over town," he said, "claiming new zoning laws let them annex land. But they're bluffing. County approval is required, and I highly doubt they got it." That was all I needed to hear. I drove straight to the county clerk's office, asked for public records regarding Oak Ridge HOA's supposed annexation. And sure enough, nothing. No approvals, no zoning changes, no legal basis for their threats. But that wasn't even the worst part. While combing through records, I found out that Karen's HOA had been illegally collecting compliance fees from homeowners who weren't even part of the HOA for months. Thousands of dollars in fake fines, all going straight into the pockets of whoever was running the scam. Armed with this information, I was ready to fight back. But then, things took a darker turn. That night, as I stepped outside to check my mailbox, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. A black SUV with tinted windows parked just up the road. Not moving, not leaving, just sitting there, watching. This wasn't just about fake fines anymore. They wanted me scared. Too bad for them, I don't scare easy. The next morning started like any other. I sat on my porch, steaming coffee in hand, enjoying the quiet hum of the countryside. The Texas sun had just begun to heat the land, casting long shadows from the trees lining my property. But my peaceful morning wasn't meant to last. From the corner of my eye, I saw a familiar truck rumble down the dirt road toward my driveway. My jaw tightened as I recognized the same two men from yesterday, Mustache Guy and Stocky Guy. But this time, they had company. A third man stepped out of the truck behind them, bigger, bulkier. He wore the same cheap uniform and an even cheaper security badge clipped to his belt. His arms were crossed over his chest, his stance wide like he was trying to make himself look more intimidating. They marched up my driveway like they owned the place. Mustache Guy was the first to speak, his voice dripping with fake authority. "We gave you a chance," he said, flashing a smug grin. "Now we're taking action." He pulled out a thick stack of papers and held them up. "This is an official order from the HOA board. You're trespassing on HOA property, and we have the authority to remove you." I let out a short, humorless laugh. They really thought I was stupid. Taking the papers from his hand, I gave them a quick glance. The so-called official order was riddled with legal jargon that made absolutely no sense. The signatures at the bottom were barely legible, and the HOA seal looked like it had been printed on a home office inkjet. I shook my head, tossing the papers onto my porch. "This is a joke," I said. "This isn't a legal document. You think I don't know the law?" Stocky Guy smirked, his arms crossed over his chest. "That's your problem," he said. "You think you're above the rules." I sighed, shaking my head. "No," I said, my voice calm but firm. "My problem is that you don't know what real authority looks like." I slowly reached into my jacket. Their smug expressions vanished. For the first time, their confidence wavered. Mustache Guy's fingers twitched slightly, his body stiffening. Stocky Guy took a half step back, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. Even the big guy, who had been standing there like a human wall, shifted uneasily. I pulled out my wallet and flipped it open, revealing my badge. "Since you guys like flashing fake badges," I said, my voice even and steady, "let me show you a real one. Detective James Carter, Texas State Police." The effect was immediate. Mustache guy went pale, his mouth slightly open like he wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. Stocky guy clenched his jaw, his bravado slipping away. The big guy? He looked like he'd just seen a ghost. Good. I stepped forward, narrowing my eyes. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to tell me who sent you here. Then you're going to get the hell off my land before I arrest you for impersonating law enforcement." Mustache guy stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. We were just following orders." I smirked. "Yeah? Then you won't mind following me down to the station for questioning." The three of them turned and bolted so fast you'd think their pants were on fire. They practically dove into their truck, tires kicking up dust as they peeled out of my driveway like the devil himself was chasing them. I stood there, watching them disappear down the road. Then I pulled out my phone. It was time to deal with the real mastermind behind this scam, Karen Dunlap. With the fake HOA cops out of the picture, it was time to finish this fight for good. I wasn't just going to push back. I was going to bury Oak Ridge HOA and make sure no one else ever fell victim to their scam again. I spent the next few hours gathering everything I had: the fake violation notices, the fraudulent annexation claims, and the bogus legal threats. Every single piece of evidence that showed just how corrupt this operation was. Then, I made a call. To the local news. The HOA's dirty secrets go public. By the next day, a news crew was parked in my driveway. A reporter stood in front of my house, microphone in hand, as I explained, on live television, how Karen Dunlap's HOA had been illegally annexing properties, strong-arming homeowners, and extorting people with fake fees. The response was immediate. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. One by one, other victims started coming forward, homeowners who had been bullied, harassed, or even tricked into paying thousands in fake compliance fines. People who had lost sleep, lost money, and in some cases, almost lost their homes because of Karen's schemes. This wasn't just me anymore. This was bigger. And I wasn't stopping until the whole scam collapsed. The final blow, bringing in the law. With the news story gaining serious traction, I took the next step. I filed a formal complaint with the Texas Attorney General's office. If there was one thing people in power hated, it was being embarrassed on national television. Investigators were on it within days, and what they uncovered? It was worse than I imagined. Karen wasn't just running a shady HOA. She was running a massive real estate scam. She had been illegally seizing land, forging property records, and slapping people with fines so high they were forced to sell their homes at a loss. And guess who was buying those homes for cheap? Karen Dunlap herself. She had built her own real estate empire by stealing from people, breaking them down, forcing them to give up, and flipping their properties for profit. Not this time. Justice is served. 2 weeks later, the hammer finally dropped. The county officially revoked Oak Ridge HOA's authority. Karen Dunlap was arrested on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and impersonating a government official. And those fake HOA cops? Turns out, they weren't even real security guards. They were unlicensed enforcers hired to intimidate people. They were facing criminal charges too. The end of Oak Ridge. HOA. It all fell apart overnight. With Karen in handcuffs, the rest of the HOA board members resigned in disgrace. Their bank accounts were frozen. Homeowners got their stolen money back. And just like that, Oak Ridge HOA was no more. Finally free that evening, I stepped out onto my porch. For the first time in weeks, there was no SUV parked near my driveway, no fake officers trying to steal my home, no threats, no harassment, just the peaceful quiet of my land. The sky was painted in shades of gold and red as the sun dipped behind the trees. I took a deep breath, feeling the warm evening air settle around me. I had won. No one was ever going to take what was mine. And the next time some wannabe HOA cop tried, I'd be ready,